A second thing is finding ways to make things less complicated. Because a lot of times when it comes to our mental health, it can be very overwhelming and a bit intimidating. But if we find ways to just simplify things for people, that would go such a long way.
Welcome back to another episode of The Leader Within. Today, I'm excited to introduce Ahmad Jabbir, a mental fitness international speaker. Ahmad advocates for a holistic, preventative approach to mental well-being, also known as mental fitness, and he believes that by embracing mental fitness as a regular practice, just like we do physical fitness, we can all develop the resilience needed to navigate life's challenges and build fulfilling lives. Given his experience, I'm excited to have him share his insights with you. Well, welcome, Ahmad. Can you please share a story that has shaped the trajectory of your career?
Hi, Angela. So a big one that really comes to my mind is actually 10 years ago. It was probably one of the most low points of my entire life, and it was for a few reasons. The first is accumulation of a lot of things were just coming together, and it just led me to a rock bottom. And so the first was I was really stressed out because I was struggling with my grades at school and university at the time. And then that mixed with a heartbreak. And then that mixed with a lot of loneliness that was going on in university. That's because I was really repelling myself away from people. I was quite socially anxious because of a lot of bullying that had happened growing up in my elementary school. I was bullied for being the only Arab in my school. And all those things just, when I got to university, just led me to a rock bottom because just completely repressing everything. But one day I was sitting in a psychology class and had about 250 students. And our professor, I'll always remember her, Dr. Jennifer Lewin, was explaining that every human being, if they just dig deep down, they'll find one core belief about themselves. And as soon as she said that, I knew exactly what mine was, and that's, I am behind. And at that point, I'm like, darn, I want to change this because I'm so frustrated of constantly going on Instagram and seeing everyone from that I knew just completely thriving. And here I was just feeling behind in every single aspect of my life. And luckily, she didn't leave us hanging, though. And she gave us some possible solutions. And one of them instantly stood out to me. And that was to get a journal and write 3 things we accomplish every single day. That could be as big as getting the job that we want, or even like opening the door for the person behind us. Big, simple, whatever it is, just write it down, whatever it is. And because we accomplished that and it deserves to be written down. And as soon as she said that, I knew that this was it. Like I was going to just start this journal. I'm going to start saying yes more. It's just going to change my life. But then my bubble burst because I heard the professor ask for a volunteer to come to the front for an experiment. And at that point, I'm like, yeah, I know I said yeah. I'm going to start saying yes more, and I'm going to start pushing myself to do more things and start this journal. But speaking in front of 250 students, that's pushing it. But Angela, I'm not sure if you can relate to this, but there was just something just deep in my soul that knew I had to raise my hand at that moment. And so I raised my hand, and for some odd reason, out of about 25 raised hands, she chose me to come to the front. And I don't remember much of what I said or what I did while I was on the stage. All I remember is the moment afterwards, because the class was clapping. And it felt really good to receive that round of applause. But what felt just as good is to go home and go to the local Dollarama and buy a journal and make that moment my first journal entry. Day 1, I volunteered in my psychology class with 250 students today. And it ended up feeling so good. I ended up writing in that journal for over 700 consecutive days. But what was really cool is at the 6-month mark, year mark, I started to feel genuinely really good. Like my great days, I felt greater. And on the days where I was comparing myself, feeling behind, struggling, feeling low, whatever it was, because of the training daily from that journal, I was able to pick myself back up quicker and be able to turn that day around. And I'm like, although I'm at like 6-month mark or 1-year mark, start to feel genuinely really good, I'm like, why don't I find ways to get better at this? And so I decided to continue, which led me to doing it for over 700 consecutive days. And that professor and that journal, I didn't know at the time, but became my introduction to the world of mental fitness, because a lot of times when we talk about our mental health, we wait until we hit that breaking point for ourselves. We wait until we hit that low point when we're struggling before we start working on it, going to therapy and doing our thing. But when we think about the fitness world, they treat it so differently. Like, think about an Olympian, for example. Whether they're at their peak fitness or someone that's injured, they're still showing up every day to exercise. They don't just stop, I'm fit now and I'm good to go. They continue. And when we use the term mental fitness, it encourages a more proactive approach. And by being able to continuously implement that into my own life, and it started with that journal and it led to so much more, but being able to implement it and starting there created such a large ripple effect in so many different ways in my own career, my personal life. And it's been 10 years and I still talk about it. So it's definitely made a huge impact on my life.
Thank you so much for your vulnerability and sharing some of those lowest lows as it helped you in your journey. And then also, like, over 700 days of consecutive days, of journaling is very, very impressive. And I'm curious from your perspective, because you've spoken to so many different groups and individuals, right? And you've spoken as a TEDx speaker as well. What would you say you've noticed gets in the way of individuals taking this more of a proactive approach than just, like you said, waiting until you hit rock bottom from a mental health perspective?
Yeah, I'd say there's a lot of different things when it comes to our culture that I feel like the mental health culture can learn from the fitness culture. And the first thing that really comes to my mind is just what I said earlier, is like that the term. We don't have a proactive term that talks about it for our mental health. And that's where mental fitness can really come in. And if we make that a more common phrase, instantly just hearing that phrase, we think of strength, proactivity in ways that we can work on ourselves. But we don't have that yet. And that mixed with the fact that right now, when all of us grow up, like when we grew up in school, we had gym class, we had phys ed, we had classes where we knew that we show up. They were mandatory classes that we showed up to. But when it comes to our mental health, they were just extra, or now they're starting to talk about it, which is great, but they don't have actual mandatory classes where we show up every day. And so a lot of those things that we grew up in mixed with the current culture right now, it's led us here. And I do want to emphasize too, I think it's phenomenal that now there is so much less stigma related to mental health, that we do approach it in a more reactive sense. And that is so important, because 10 years ago, that was barely there. And now it's become so much more common for people to begin talking about it. People at work, at school, wherever the environment all over the world are more open about it. And that's phenomenal. And I think this is just the next step that we gotta do and push, is to begin talking about it more proactively. I also want to mention that this isn't just some new revolutionary term that I made up. It actually was introduced in 1964, but it's still not mainstream yet. And so I just would be very excited to see it become more mainstream. But then to answer also a bit more of your question, I went on a bit of a tangent there. I got too excited. When it comes to using the term mental fitness, that's one way we can begin integrating that into the culture. A second thing is finding ways to make things less complicated, because a lot of times when it comes to our mental health, like if you work in that world, it's more easy, but for the general public, it can be very overwhelming and a bit intimidating. But if we find ways to just simplify things for people, that would go such a long way. And I think one thing I've noticed a huge benefit in my life and other people's lives is any skill we talk about when it comes to our mind, let's call that a workout for ourselves. That is, for example, showing up, like, trying to think of like when it comes to our resilience. If we do something that challenges our resilience, that's a resilience workout. If we're doing something that pushes us outside of our comfort zone, that's a discomfort workout. And so what if we begin calling all these skills workouts, and it's all connected to the world of mental fitness? How much of a huge difference would that be? And I think the third thing that really comes to my mind is when it comes to fitness culture, there's so much encouragement for group experiences. There's group classes, there's have a gym buddy, there's so many different things. but we don't have that as much when it comes to the world of mental health. And yes, people are more open about it, but just exercising it would go such a long way. And especially in the workplace nowadays, when there is so much burnout that exists, like having that can be so preventative if we're able to be more proactive about our mental health through mental fitness.
There's a few things that come to mind as you talk through some of that. The first one is actually a visual related to, when you sit on an airplane and the flight attendant kind of walks you through, if something were to go bad, make sure you take that oxygen mask, you put it on yourself before you put it on anyone else, right?
Yeah.
And it makes me think back to like when you talk about some of these workout routines and just normalizing and equipping people with the language, right? When it comes to mental fitness, because then you're saying to them, you know what? You have to be able to take care of yourself. I understand that for you to be able to effectively show up in whatever capacity that looks like for your life and for that workplace. And without that, you wouldn't be able to function. So let's like help you do that. And I think when we destigmatize that piece of it, I think is really, really important. And even I think working from just an HR perspective, there's still stigma sometimes around leaves of absences around mental well-being. And I think that's a little bit concerning because similar to what you were describing and what I described from a visual perspective, without them taking care of themselves, how do we expect them to show up and effectively give them their all, right?
Yeah, 100%. We need to take care of ourselves in order for us to be more creative, be able to be better team players, we show up as better leaders. When we show up fully as ourselves, we'll be able to make more of an impact in our community. Just like what you're saying with the oxygen mask example on an airplane, that goes such a long way. And it's also really interesting too, because the more it's encouraged in a proactive sense, the less stigma there will be in a reactive sense. Because it's so normalized if we just do it every single day when we're feeling good, that it becomes even considered more okay if we are having a very low point or we're going through a bit of a struggle and we need to take that time off. So they do go extremely hand in hand together.
And like something else that you mentioned that resonated with me is when it comes to working through some of those things, because I actually went through burnout and depression myself. And sometimes when you're in it, you don't know what you don't know, right? Versus what I'm hearing, what you're saying is that when you proactively work some of these muscles or you have your own workout routine, it almost equips you with more awareness. And that group one that you mentioned, it really hit me because it's like when you're so deep in it, if it wasn't for those objective perspectives around you, whether it's a therapist, other peers, or whatever it may be, maybe you would have missed something that you otherwise would have had the ability to work on yourself. And I'm curious for you because you talk a lot about routines and what could work, right? And again, it's individual specific, but how does an individual even begin to be more proactive? If you were to be like, hey, I have to start all over again with all the insights that I have, how would you start developing your routine?
Yeah, I love this question. And I think the first thing that comes to my mind that I do want to share is a lot of times when I've spoken, the speeches, talk to people about this, a concern that comes up is like, Ahmed, like, I have to balance my fitness routine. I have to balance like laundry and kids and this and that. And now you want to add on another routine for myself. And so I want to clarify that just like a professional athlete or whatever capacity, when a professional athletes, they have the regular season and they show up and they play at their sport. But during their off season, a lot of times they're working out and they're gaining more muscle mass to be able to be more efficient during the regular season. And it's the same exact mindset we can be able to use and implement for our own lives. The more of this that we do, the more efficient and convenient and easy flowing things can be. Because sometimes when we're burnt out, for example, we're not that efficient, especially when we're burnt out. But imagine if we took more time to recharge ourselves and find ways to make this a habit. We'd be able to get more done, and maybe we'll even have even more time in our day. So it's almost like an investment. And so the first thing that really, I guess, when you ask like where do we start, it starts, in my opinion, with self-reflection for ourselves. What is it that we are not doing well in? And it's not just like, oh yeah, I'm doing well here. There's always gaps in our own lives, the way that we show up. And it could also be through skills, different things, or what is fear of mine? Something that we spoke about a lot when I worked at the YouTube channel yesterday is finding ways to look at what is our fears and pushing ourselves outside of our comfort zones. And I got a chance to see so many different people doing that and implementing that, and that goes such a long way. But really having more moments to have more self-reflection is the first step. It's understanding what is it that I'm struggling with as a skill, what is it I'm afraid of, and those will show us our blind spots. And so sometimes that's hard for us to do when we're on our own. I know for me, I have tons of blind spots I miss. It's not until I talk to someone, a friend, have a conversations, those deep moments, whether through therapy or through friends, that we're able to find more of those blind spots for ourselves. So that's the first, it's self-reflection. And then from there is to create something that's out of that. For example, for myself, when I did that journal years ago and I stopped after the 700-day mark-ish, and I've actually put it back into my life a few months ago. And that's because I've noticed that strength in that area not being as strong as it was before. And I'm trying to find ways to work on it because I'm finding myself comparing myself, feeling behind again. And it's like, just like when we go to the gym and we work out a muscle, if we stop for years, we're going to lose that muscle. We have to continue to work on it in order to maintain it. And so right now I'm reworking out having more proud workouts for myself. And every day, back then I was using a journal. Now I'm using Notion because it's a different time. And writing 3 things that I feel like I accomplished, that I'm proud of myself at the end of each day. And so that's just been a big routine for myself. Another is meditation right now for me. I realize I'm a lot of times find the worst negative outcome for myself. Like it's about to happen. And I want to change that. I want to be able to look at things and believe that the more positive outcome will happen. And so right now I'm trying to have also more of a positive reframing workout, if we call it, whatever it is, because that's also a skill that I want to develop. And so those are 2 examples for myself of as to how I've implemented that as a routine. But there's hundreds of different ways that we can work out and have mental fitness routines for ourselves. It all starts with just us and that self-reflection. But it is very, very exciting when we begin to implement it.
And I appreciate the call out on that. Take that time to reflect and identify what makes sense for you, because there could be, like you said, millions of resources, some of which makes absolutely no sense for your context, some of which might align now, but may shift later. And what I'm hearing also is that it doesn't have to be a complex, lengthy exercise. It could probably be even intentionally incorporating 1 minute as a start within your day. Like that pause does so much more than just operating on autopilot, right? So I really appreciate the call out on just pause, reflect on it, and then create a plan off of it. And then chat with people who may see something that you haven't seen as well.
Exactly. Something else I want to mention on top of that too is a lot of times when someone may hear mental fitness, they may think of just meditation. And there's so many different ways that we can be creative with our mental fitness routine. It doesn't have to be just meditation, although meditation's impacting my life and journaling is in so many different ways, but we can work out in so many different ways. Just like what we're talking right now, it could literally be a 1 minute, 10 minutes, 3 times a week. We can create our own routine. It's so flexible based off of us. And yeah, there's a book, The Atomic Habits and The Power of Habit. I forgot which one mentions it. They both are great on habits, but just starting small goes such a long way and then begin to expand and expand more. So yeah, it starts with those baby steps.
And you know what, as you talk about that, one thing that comes to mind for me is that when you do write down those 3 accomplishments, something for me that I've done mentally instead of write it down is I'm like, you know what, I just proved to myself that I just did something difficult, right? Or I just proved to myself that I did a great work in blank, right? In whatever it may be, because I think sometimes, especially as high performers, you're so good at that's part of what I do anyway. So why would I pause and think about it? But then when you do that, I think you create facts for you to pull back on later on when you are doubting or when you're in a lower spot being like, can I, or whatever those questions might be that challenges you, you're like, I have the facts to back it up that I can. And so I want to kind of tangent towards your work with the Seek Discomfort Brand, which is the apparel company that was part of the YouTube channel Yes Theory. And for those who don't know this YouTube channel, they have over 9 million subscribers. And their biggest belief is that life's greatest moments and deepest connections exist outside of our comfort zone. So what was one of your biggest takeaways from that experience?
Yeah, I loved that experience, and I definitely would consider it my dream job. Work was there for over 3 years, and it really got a chance to see people all over the world pushing themselves outside of their comfort zone and seeing the variety. And I think the biggest thing that comes to my mind is that it looks different for all of us, pushing ourselves outside of our comfort zone. For some people, going to therapy was pushing themselves outside of their comfort zone. For some people, it's skydiving. For some, skydiving is easy, but therapy is hard, or the other vice versa. It can look different for all of us. And just to see that, like, because of our environment and the way that we grew up in, it leads us to different fears for ourselves. So being able to challenge that and seeing the euphoria that comes naturally when we do step outside of our comfort zone goes such a long way. And been able to, I guess, see that this is a universal experience too, because our brand was in over 160 countries. And so just to see that there's literally people all over the world that resonate with this message, and two, that it's impacting them the same way, even though they live in two different parts of the world, that was just so cool to see.
Thank you for sharing that experience. And I know part of that work was to encourage more individuals to say yes to things that made them uncomfortable. And so on the flip side of that, with mental fitness and mental health comes being able to say no to things in order to protect your well-being. So I'd be curious from your journey and just all the work that you've done, what has helped you get better at saying no?
Yeah, so it's interesting because that's something that we spoke about a lot. People always think like, oh yeah, we encourage people to say yes. But actually, one of the biggest things that we can push ourselves outside of our comfort zone is to set boundaries and say no. And those two words, yes and no, when we use them, when we find the right balance in our lives, can be the two most powerful words for ourselves. Because yes, because we're getting ourselves to face our fears and do things that are new. But no is when we set those boundaries and understand what is working for us and what isn't. Because the more we're able to say no, the more energy we have to say yes to the things that really energize us. And that's what we want in our lives. Is obviously our time here on earth, it could be so short. And so by spending more time to do things that energize us, that goes such a long way. But I think you had asked like what has helped me out set more boundaries. I think the first thing that really comes to my mind is it's more of that reflection. Understanding is like talking to other people about other safe spaces around me. Like, hey, that rubbed me off the wrong way. Is that? But having more of that reflection goes a long way. But also a rule that I have is if it's going to bother me for more than 48 hours, I talk about it. With that person, got to set that boundary. That means this is something that I need to change and shift, whether with that person or whoever it is to come. I think that has served me so well because I don't think anyone likes the feeling of going to bed at night and rolling and be like, feeling upset, like if their boundary got crossed or they're upset about someone. A lot of times things can get fixed with just simple communication. And if people aren't respecting our boundaries, which most of the time they hopefully will, but if they don't, and that is also very common that people may not respect our boundaries, that's where we have to distance ourselves or be able to talk about it. I think there's so many different ways to do that. But when it comes to recognizing those boundaries, that in itself is a very skill that to this day, I'm constantly finding ways to work on.
That reflection piece made me think back to something you said earlier as well, in terms of when you said the professor asked individuals to raise their hand and something deep inside of you was like, raise your hand. I think that's similar to boundaries and what you say yes or no to as well, right? Because there's that fine line between, am I saying no because it's uncomfortable, or am I saying no because there is actually something rooted in that is actually like a red flag? So I think when you do create that space to reflect and listen to yourself, like just know that that's going to do you wonders in helping you with your mental well-being as well. So as we slowly wrap up our conversation, when it comes to unleashing the potential of individuals and organizations, what would you say is the first thing that comes to mind that helps with this?
Yeah, I think what really comes to my mind is being able to have more conversations, community about these things, because our potential comes in different shapes and sizes and in different paths. It's so different for everyone, but it's really hard to find that without more of that sense of connection, community, and listening and understanding. Because there's been many times in my life where I've been able to, like other people have been able to see my potential in me that I didn't see in myself. And that's because it took time to listen and hear me out and me sharing about things that I like, that I don't like. And it helps us find those blind spots that can exist. So when we do have more of that community and connection for ourselves and with deeper empathy and listening, that goes such a long way, because then we're able to find ways to see more potential in others and see in ourselves also as a reflection. When we're able to see more potential in others, we're able to see more potential in ourselves too. It's like an equation. It's so cool to see. So, and I think that all comes back to our belief, our community. These skills are genuinely so important. So what I believe what you're doing through this podcast is so important, because it's genuinely so needed to be able to have these types of conversations. So I truly believe also listening to this podcast is a great way to help people unleash their greatest potential.
Well, thank you for sharing your insights and giving my podcast a plug. I really appreciate that. I have another question that came to mind is, now that you've had 2 opportunities to speak as a TEDx speaker, what would you say is, if anyone aspires to do that one day, what tip would you provide to them?
Yeah, honestly, a lot of times we wait for it. And I know it's interesting because about 8-10 years ago, I really wanted to do a TEDx. And I thought to myself, it has to be perfect and I have to figure this out first, and this first I'll do this. It's like, no. Just do it. And I think that's the first thing comes to our mind, is that people think I need to have it like the most perfect talk ever. We don't need that. Once you're hired to do a TEDx, the coaches, the team there will help you also refine it, perfect it. That's why there's sense of community there within the TEDx organization. And that's the first thing, is just don't wait to have it perfect. And 2, it's a lot more accessible than we think it is. People think, there's been many times where I've shared with people that, yeah, I'm a speaker. They're like, oh, one day you should do a TEDx. I'm like, oh yeah, I've already done it. And they're like, what? And they don't realize that it's so much more accessible than they think it is. So literally just hopping on every TEDx page's Instagram, or just even reach out to me. If you have questions as to how to find TEDx, always feel free. Whoever's listening to this, more than happy to answer any questions on this process. But yeah, I think those 2 things, it's more accessible than we think it is. And 2, don't wait for perfection.
Really great call outs. Last question to you is, what's one thing that's top of mind for you right now, so that listeners can have a way to be like, okay, if I'm going to reach out to Ahmad, this is like something that I could potentially help him with. Or it might be that almost like that connection to make it less intimidating to reach out to a stranger.
Yeah. So if they want to talk about anything related to mental fitness or public speaking or even TEDx's, those 3 things are my biggest passion. So really anything related to keynote speaking, TEDx, or mental fitness, you always have a friend in me.
Appreciate that so much. Thank you again for your vulnerability and sharing your insights through all the conversations, speaking engagements that you've had. I appreciate you. And to everyone else that's tuned into another episode, thank you so much for your time and attention. It means more to me than you'll know, and I can't wait to stay in touch with you on my next episode. Till then, stay safe.